Hey guys! Welcome to my channel where we're going to delve into the realm of animations. Today, we will begin with the story of Cassian, a hero of his nation who ends up becoming the most powerful villain. This is the story of a never-ending conflict between virtue and vice. It is a highly believed myth among people that the child of the day and the child of the night engaged in an ongoing rivalry. This conflict between them gave rise to individuals on the planet endowed with unique abilities and dividing them into good and evil forces. This story revolves around those forces involving the people like Ralph, a notorious villain, and the heroes like Cassian, who stands against them. As the story begins, we see Ralph engrossed in his criminal activities, spreading fear and dread among the civilians. Using his powers, he keeps spreading destruction everywhere while his henchmen, a group of criminals, continue looting the banks while spreading fear among the people. After they complete their mission, one of the criminals signals others to leave and Ralph agrees, while counting the money with a grin on face. The scene then changes and we're taken inside a bus where a masked individual comes to the aid of the civilians, apprehending one of the criminals while confusing the other. Meanwhile, Ralph and his underlings, who seem happy and satisfied with what they did, head towards the same bus to leave the place and celebrate their success. However, as soon as they come close to the bus, their fellow, who was standing inside, is tossed out of the window, leaving them shocked and confused. The very next moment, the masked individual comes out of the bus, dragging the other criminal along. Throwing the criminal on the ground, he causes Ralph to become increasingly bewildered and curious about his identity. Removing his mask, he then reveals his face and turns out to be Cassian, the top-class psycho of his nation, leaving Ralph shocked. Removing the Bluetooth from his ear, Cassian then burns it up, instilling fear within Ralph. Charging his hand with his ignition abilities, he then punishes Ralph and his entire gang, eventually saving the day. The news of Cassian brutally punishing Ralph reaches the ears of the Human Rights Committee that starts demanding Lampus to punish him for that. Meanwhile, in the Lampus head office, Tuppence Schiller, a comrade of Cassian, sits, going through the briefs while expressing her disappointment at his act of punishing Ralph. In response, Cassian expresses his disappointment at receiving criticism instead of appreciation for this heroic act of his. Tuppence argues that just because he thinks his act was right doesn't mean it was right. She goes on to state that considering the scandal his act has made, they have decided to suspend him for the time being. Disappointed by the decision, Cassian leaves the office, expressing his frustration at Tuppence's attitude. While he is doing that, his phone begins to ring, and it is Jeff, his closest friend and fellow psyker, urgently requesting to meet in Rhodes. Hearing that, Cassian becomes shocked, considering the faraway location that his friend wants him to travel to. However, considering that it must be something important, he takes a flight and reaches Rhodes on that very day. Sitting in a cafe while waiting for Jeff, Cassian remembers his childhood spent in an orphanage in the same country. There, he used to be very good friends with Jeff, who had the ability to move inanimate objects that deeply impressed Cassian. Reminiscing all those memories, Cassian can't help but smile, calling those the best days of his life. Just like that, he keeps waiting for Jeff to come until the sun starts to set, making him increasingly concerned about Jeff's well-being. As Cassian thinks of what might have happened to his friend, Jeff appears from behind, badly injured and panting. His critical situation makes Cassian shocked and he asks what has happened to him. Jeff, who seems in a hurry, hands over his necklace to Cassian and crashes to the ground. Shocked, Cassian inquires what happened to him while Jeff urges him to leave the place as soon as possible, saying that staying here will put him in danger. Just as he says this, a person wearing a mask appears from behind. Sensing his presence, Jeff pushes Cassian away to save him while the person pulls out his sword and kills Jeff. Witnessing that, Cassian stands frozen in a shock as Jeff crashes to the ground and loses his life. After a few moments, he looks up, finding the culprit to be escaping, and becomes enraged, madly running after him to seek vengeance. After some time, the person finally stops near a cliff and turns to Cassian. Charging his hand with his ignition ability, Cassian vows to make him pay for what he did. However, as the person removes his mask, Cassian becomes shocked to recognize him as Jack, his fellow psyker. As Cassian begins to express his rage at his act, Jack explains that he has only removed the traitor from their organization. Cassian is faced with a dilemma when Jack accuses Jeff of being a traitor and is not ready to believe him. Just then, another psyker named Lyra arrives and verifies Jack's claims, saying that Jeff had murdered one of their comrades. Complicating matters further, Jack and Lyra begin to suspect Cassian and tell him to surrender, warning him against using any violence. Despite their warnings, Cassian becomes defensive and refuses to back down, even engaging in a fight with them. As the battle intensifies, Cassian finds himself on the edge of a cliff, and in a moment of recklessness he loses his footing and falls into the river below. While in the river, Cassian loses consciousness and is about to die when Jeff's necklace saves him. As he is taking his last breaths, the necklace starts to emit rays that not only save his life, but also transport him to a completely different place. When he regains consciousness, he hears voices around him and is stunned to find himself in a high school lavatory in South Korea, his birthplace. As he gets up to wash his face and collect himself, he is shocked once again by his reflection in the mirror. His appearance has completely transformed, leaving him looking like a Korean high school student. Thinking that it must be a dream, he washes his face and looks in the mirror again, finding his appearance to be unchanged. This makes him realize that he has taken the place of the original owner of this body, who has died, further adding to his shock. Suddenly, his head starts to hurt and he begins to recall unknown memories, belonging to the original owner of his body, making him stunned. As Cassian stands in awe, someone calls out his name. Startled, he turns around only to find no one. Suddenly, the rays start to emit from his necklace once more, forming a fiery being that introduces himself as Moros, an ancient and noble spirit. Moros informs Cassian that he is the one who saved his life and brought him to Korea. He goes on to explain that Jeff gave this necklace to Cassian so that he could protect him. As Moro speaks, Cassian keeps himself busy by browsing through the phone of the body's owner. While scrolling through the phone, he comes across a recent article from Lampus. The article states that Cassian was a traitor who used black powers to kill his fellow Jeff and got killed himself as well. This comes as a shock to Cassian, who cannot bear this framing and false accusation. Moros tells him to calm down, explaining that he is not the top-class psyker Cassian anymore. Because of his growing anger and frustration, his body begins to undergo a transformation, changing his appearance to that of a villain. Now how Cassian reacts to this change and what happens later will be discussed in the next video. Till then, stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to find my latest videos. Take care.